books. Some of these books are really popular, and but they just didn't do it for me. Hey everybody, Eric with D3 Reads. Thanks so much for joining. Today I want to talk to you about some fantastic authors and some of their least fantastic work. But first, a TBR update. I got an early start on my June TBR, and I wanted to let you know where I was with that. Right now I'm currently in the midst of 3 different books, with the 4th waiting in the wings. Now 3 of the books I'm currently reading are all related in that they are part of a video we're putting together that I mentioned last week. About fantasy and science fiction humor books. So right now, I'm currently reading John Scalzi's Red Shirts. I mentioned that last week as well as Matt Dinniman's Dungeon Crawler Carl. Now, so far, I'm liking both of these books. I'm still in the first half of both of them. And I'm not going to go into too much detail right now because I talked about them last week. And I'm going to go over them, the book review, here when we do the humor, sci-fi, and fantasy books. But I will say that of the 2, the one I expected to enjoy the most, I am not enjoying as much as the one I expected to enjoy a little bit less. Not to say I'm not liking both books, but I'm enjoying one more than the other, and it's not the one that I expected. I'm just going to say that for right now, but I'm curious if you've read one or both of these books. Let me know what you think about them, Dungeon Crawler Carl and John Scalzi's Red Shirts. In addition to those books, I also got my hands on a classic, Bill the Galactic Hero by Harry Harrison. This is considered a classic science fiction humor book. Terry Pratchett apparently had a fond place in his heart for it, and so I'm really looking forward to reading it, and in particular because I actually had my hands on this. Jeff, the co-host of D3 Reads, he actually loaned me this book almost 40 years ago. He foolishly allowed me to borrow this book, and I never once read it. I may have cracked it open, but I never got anywhere with it, and then I promptly lost it. 4 decades later, almost, I'm finally coming across a copy of it. So, Jeff, I got your book back. I'm going to read it, and then I'll return it to you, okay? So, the idea here is I'm going to finish these 3 books up and then roll them in with the other classic humor, science fiction, and fantasy books, and we'll talk about which are the best of the best when we get that video ready, hopefully sometime coming up in mid-June. But aside from those books, I've also just recently started Martha Wells' Witch King, and I'm enjoying it so far. It starts off in a way that it's clear that this is not your ordinary fantasy. Now, obviously, this isn't related to the humor books I was just talking about. Once we get done with that, I'm going to be moving on to an updated fantasy book video, so this will be part of that one. So, got a lot of books that I'm going through right now, enjoying all of them so far, and I'll let you know what I think about them here in a couple of weeks. So those are the books I'm currently reading. But what I also want to talk about today was, as I started kind of shuffling through some of these books, some of the classic books that I had read, and as I was coming to terms with the fact that one of the books I'm currently reading wasn't really living up to expectations, that made me think about books that had kind of disappointed me in the past. Books that a lot of people seem to really love, but that just didn't stick the landing with me. What I want to do is share with you some of these books. Some of these books are really popular, and but they just didn't do it for me. I try to give you a good reason why, but let's just get on the table. This is obviously very subjective. The book that I didn't care for might be one of your favorite books. And if that's the case, I want to hear from you. I want to know what you liked about these books that I'm going to say that didn't really do it for me. But I don't want anyone to think that I'm trying to insult either the writers of these books or folks that are fans of them. I think that each of the writers that wrote these books are extremely talented. I'm fans of them, but for some reason, I just didn't care for the titles in question. The other thing is that none of these books I consider to be like completely bad. I think that all of them have their good points, but they just didn't come together the way some of the other books that these folks have written came together. All right, so let's get a move on, huh? The first book that I want to talk about, actually the next 2 books were both written by the same person, Anne Rice. I've made it clear in previous videos, particularly best horror authors and best vampire books, that Anne Rice has written some of the best vampire books out there. I think Interview with the Vampire and The Vampire Lestat are both individually some of the best vampire literature out there. But the Vampire Chronicles, I think, came to a screeching halt with Queen of the Damned. But it wasn't at the beginning of the Queen of the Damned. You see, that's just it. Is when I got that book, which was published in 1988, I was really excited, and I felt that the first half of that book was truly terrifying. Yeah, there are parts in there that I just there are parts in there that I just thought really stood out in a way that the horror from the previous two books didn't. I mean, it's like almost like a Stephen King novel. But then it just hit a wall and it never recovered. My reviews tend to be spoiler free, but a couple of the books here, I'm going to have to step into spoiler territory. So if you don't want to hear anything from the Queen of the Damned, I would suggest that you go on to Tale of the Body Thief next. But I despise the little superhero team of vampires that got cobbled together in the second half of that book to go after the Queen of the Damned. I felt it was just the imagery was I felt ridiculous, particularly the one vampire who was dressed up like the classic vampires from the movies. I just thought he was silly, and so the first half of the book I enjoyed, but the second half I just really felt it was Anne Rice kind of reaching for ideas, trying to be original, trying to maybe break away from her first two novels a little bit, and it just didn't work for me. So I felt Queen of the Damned was definitely the worst of that initial trilogy. The Goodreads average review of this is 3.92, which is I think the least or the lowest score of the vampire those first three vampire books. Actually, the first four. So I guess on average, folks agree with me, though it still rates pretty high. I don't rate it that high at all. If I could split it in half, I would say the first half would be more of a 4, and the second half would be more like a 2.5. So that's my feeling of Queen of the Damned. But let me know if you disagree. If you felt that story was a complete and worthy addition to the Vampire Chronicles. But then we go from there to Tale of the Body Thief, which came out in 1992. Now, by the time that came out, I had kind of moved on from my disappointment with Queen of the Damned, and I was ready to give it a shot. And it's not that the book is bad. It rates a surprising 4.13 on Goodreads, which is higher than all the first three books, and I don't see how. Now, The Tale of the Body Thief is a fine story. There's nothing really particularly wrong with it. The only thing is that I feel it moved from vampire horror into paranormal mystery, and the whole book is really just a way to explore Lestat's psyche and how he thinks, and that's not why I like vampires. In my video on best vampire books, I've made it clear that I think that the best vampire stories, vampires are rooted in evil, and it's that struggle against this unquenchable evil that makes the horror. And in this, you've got a sympathetic vampire who gets pushed out of his body, and he's trying to find himself, basically, that's been taken over by another person. But it wasn't interesting to me. I felt that the story was, again, fine, but as a vampire story and part of the Vampire Chronicles, I didn't care for it. So even though it rates a 4.13 on average in Goodreads, I felt like it was a 3 at best. It was a fine paranormal mystery story on its own, but as part of a vampire storyline, didn't really care for it. So those two Anne Rice books, I felt, just didn't live up to the first two books in her Vampire Chronicles storyline. So, and I've never read anything past, and I think I just kind of got disillusioned with the whole Vampire Chronicles storyline after that. So let me know what you think. If you enjoyed Tale of the Body Thief, if you think it deserves a little bit more credit, I'd love to hear from you. Seriously, I would like to hear from folks who, well, if you agree with me, that's great. If you don't agree with me, let me know. All right, next up is one as an author I haven't talked about at all to this point, but as I was trying to think through books that really disappointed me, this one just jumped into mind, even though I haven't read it in quite some time. Tom Clancy and Rainbow Six. Look at this monster. So a little background. So sometime in the early 90s, I got hooked on Jack Ryan, and I read everything I could get my hands on. And I felt that the books were exciting. Jack Ryan was a sympathetic character. I felt the stories were fresh. They evolved a bit. Of course, they were rooted in the Cold War power politics and that kind of thing. But with Clear and Present Danger. He brings the war on drugs into the storyline, and then terrorism after that. I mean, the books I felt were just really well done, and I love the characters. When he takes his character Clark and he kind of goes on his own tangent there, because Jack Ryan winds up becoming the president of the United States, and he's not much of a that's not much of a way to to use an action hero. Um, he creates this make believe super team of soldiers who go around fighting terrorists, and it just felt like it lost its claim to kind of a realistic action. You see, that was what I felt was the real draw of these Jack Ryan novels, is that they were so encased in realistic organizations and concepts and that kind of thing, that you felt that this was something that not maybe could happen, but it just felt real. And then all of a sudden, he's inventing new organizations and these eco terrorists and things that it didn't feel gritty and real the way the Jack Ryan novels did. And so after all this reading, at the very end of it, I just felt just empty. I didn't feel super excited about it. I never read another Rainbow Six novel after that ever again. So I'd like to know if you were a fan of Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan novels, what you thought about Rainbow Six, and whether or not you continued reading them after that. All right, so the next one might be a little bit more controversial. I think I hinted at it in some of my fantasy novels, but Branden Sanderson and MISTBORN. Now, I know Sanderson's got a legion of fans, and I'm not saying MISTBORN was a bad book, but I'm going to say this. I'm going to say something that if you didn't notice this, if you don't want me to ruin MISTBORN for you, you need to skip past this section, because once I say this, if you've never noticed this before, you won't be able to read this again without it being ruined. So I'm going to put a big banner up here. Don't watch this if you don't want me to ruin MISTBORN for you with a annoying little occurrence that happens throughout the book. Okay, the characters are fine. Okay, I think I mentioned before in my review that I felt that it took me just over half the book to really feel invested in this. You could really feel this was Branden Sanderson's first book, but I felt that the writing was a little clunky, and that the characters, he really relied on you to want to be able to like them versus just creating characters that were likable. But with that said, Kelsier and Venn, they grew on me throughout the book, so that was fine. But there's two observations I want to make. One is I felt that, and this isn't a bad thing, but it's one of the reasons why it didn't connect with me. Unlike, say, The Lord of the Rings and C.S. Lewis's works, Branden Sanderson, and he even kind of said this himself in an offhand way. I saw an interview with him where he was talking about how he called Tolkien Grandpa Tolkien, and how he was kind of like a third generation of fantasy writers. And you can tell that because you can see that he is very image driven and action driven in a way older writers were not, rather. And that's fine. Things change and it's a different kind of thing. But this was such a visual, action oriented story that I felt that it really expected you to be invested in the special powers that the MISTBORN wield for you to enjoy this. Now that's fine, and I think that connected with a lot of Sanderson's fans, and so I'm not really denigrating that. I'm just saying it didn't really work for me. I felt it was less subtle and less nuanced than, say, The Lord of the Rings and the types of challenges that the characters had to deal with that. But the thing that really bothered me about this, and this was simply, I think, Branden Sanderson being a new writer, is, my God, how many times did his characters roll their eyes? If you go through there, I was keeping a count. I just quit after a while. But there are sometimes his characters were rolling their eyes at each other every page or two. It's like, and one time I found like one page where the characters were rolling their eyes at each other, and it became so distracting. I mean, that was the way that he conveyed sarcasm or exasperation. Venn rolled her eyes. Kelsier rolled his eyes. This guy rolled his eyes. I mean, and then the shrug. It seems like a very. It's almost like Sanderson was too focused on smaller parts of his story that he didn't go back and see. Oh, wait a minute! I keep using this way to convey emotion. That's just it was annoying to me. So I apologize. I mean, if you watch this, it's your own fault. I warned you. But if you go through and read this, you're going to see that there's a lot of eye rolling in this to the point of distraction. So anyway, MISTBORN, it's overall a fine book. I plan on continuing the MISTBORN series. I haven't finished these yet, so I still plan on it. It was good enough to want to continue, but my gosh, I was not in love with the book. Okay, and finally, and I mentioned this in a previous video too, H.P. Lovecraft. I mean, clearly the father of cosmic horror. He is his works have inspired writers for decades, and for good reason. I think H.P. Lovecraft is a masterful writer, but two of his hallmark writing, his signature stories, I just felt just were not that good. The Call of Cthulhu, which was published in 1928, and then the At the Mountains of Madness in 1936. These two books, these were like seminal moments in the Lovecraft verse, right? And the Lovecraftian mythos is centered around these, and they're just not his best work. Now, I think the Call of Cthulhu was the better of the two stories, in that it was super mysterious. You know, I really wanted to find out what happened with the ship that had been with the small ship that had been found with the lone survivor and that kind of thing. But the culmination to the reveal of Cthulhu and how he escapes from it was just silly and anticlimactic. Did not care for it really at all. Then you move over to At the Mountains of Madness, and that's a longer story. And I think it had such potential. The mystery, the terror of the setting of being in Antarctica. I think it had all the elements needed to be a truly terrifying story. But at this point, I think H.P. Lovecraft makes a huge mistake. And what he does is he takes the protagonist of the story and he puts him in this Cyclopean ancient city in Antarctica, and they're making their way through and having to kind of piece together of what happened there using these ancient hieroglyphics and stuff, and they just figure everything out. He explains like the origins of the old ones and how they all came to Earth and how they all became extinct, and to the level of detail to where he was just boring. It became like a science class. And so I just really felt that At the Mountains of Madness was just a wasted effort, and that it's almost like he was just trying to get everything out when he should have left some of that mystery in place. So that's it, guys. Those are some of the books from some of the best authors out there that I just didn't think made the list of their best work. But what do you think? You know, if you enjoyed these books, you think I'm off base, let me know. If you have other books that you were disappointed in that other people seem to like, let me know that too. I'd like to know what didn't make your cut. Appreciate your all's time, guys. Have a great day and keep on reading.